to make sure that we have an opportunity for everyone to answer all of the questions. Without further ado, I want to invite and welcome Jeff Pickle.
Thank you, Ian, and members of the Chamber who are here. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank so many of you guys for showing up. Great turnout today, and thank you for being here. Here at Rim Park in Waterloo, as Ian mentioned, my name is Jeff Pickle. I work with 570 News and will be moderating today's forum. This is the second of 3 candidate forums organized by the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce in advance of the election coming up on October 22nd, just a few days away. A debate for regional chair was held on October 3rd. A similar event for the mayor and regional council for the city of Kitchener is going to happen tomorrow at the Victoria Park Pavilion. For the candidates here, we'll go over a little bit of the format for this afternoon's forum. The format for this event will be 1 minute for introductory remarks from each candidate, followed by questions identified by the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. For those questions, for each question, we'll get around 3 minutes for a response. Please note, as Ian mentioned, in the interest of covering as many issues as possible, and with the number of candidates on stage, we will have no rebuttals after the answers have given the candidate. There will also be no closing remarks. So we're just going to try to really get through content here. No rebuttals and no closing remarks. Again, 3 minutes to answer each question. We're now going to start with open remarks. The candidate order was drawn earlier today, and we'll begin with mayoral candidate Kelly Stice. After that will be regional council candidate Zan Zuby, mayoral candidate Dave Jaworski, regional council candidate Sean Strickland, regional council candidate Jane Mitchell, regional council candidate Jim Erb, and mayoral candidate Chris Koletnik. After we make it through our opening remarks, Zan Zuby will then answer the first question, and then we'll just follow that order. So Dave Jaworski will answer the second question, and so on, as we make our way through. I would now invite Kelly Stice to begin with 1 minute for opening statements.
So my name is Kelly. Let me pull that closer.
That's great.
My name is Kelly Stice, and I'm proud to be a candidate and to offer a choice of leadership for the mayor of Waterloo. Over the last 4 years, I have been frustrated. I have been frustrated by the disregard of accountability and transparency in our city. I've been frustrated by the increase in graffiti, and I've been frustrated by the lack of fiscal responsibility. I'm proud to bring you more than 16 years of municipal government experience. I currently work for the city of Kitchener, but there was a time I worked concurrently for both Kitchener and Waterloo under a shared services agreement. So I know what it is like to work in both cities, and I know that we can be better. I know policy, I know budgets, I know what transparency looks like, and I have hope for Waterloo. The advanced polls saw an increase in voter turnout by 7%. This indicates to me that people are concerned. It seems that people want change. I will be that change. I am Kelly Stice, Mayor for Waterloo.
Down to regional council candidate Zan Zuby.
Hi, my name is Sam. From the people that I'm running against, you're going to hear a lot about experience. That decades of experience demands decades more. That these are scary times of change. And that career politicians are the only ones who can do this job. Well, I'm here to tell you that I have experience, and I'd like to talk to you about my experience for a minute. I'm coming from the tech sector. I'm the only one on this table that actually can relate to that sector, and I know that the way that other tech sectors like Silicon Valley have grown, that has led to inequality. We want to avoid that here. So that's an experience that I can bring to the table. I'm not a driver, and the future of our region is people commuting, is walkability, and we need to have that experience at the table. I'm a young professional that's building community through volunteerism and through outreach. And I've lived in other cities. I've experienced how they do public transportation, how they deal with snow in the winter. I can bring those experiences to the table as well. My final experience is that I worked in Parliament Hill. I worked in federal politics for years. I've done committee work, legislative work, worked with media, and done research as well. Waterloo Region is considered a leader in innovation, but we don't have that reflected in our regional government. It's time for new experience at the table.
To mayoral candidate Dave Jaworski.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this forum, and thank you to the audience for becoming informed. I've been in Waterloo for many years, came here to study university, met my wife Jan at the back there. Hi Jan. And we have our 29th wedding anniversary coming up on Sunday, and she's getting a special surprise, tickets to Ken Sealing's retirement party. In the prior term of council, our largest employer, BlackBerry, shed thousands of jobs. That was something we really needed to focus on at that time. 9,000 people without a job, and we needed to get those people back employed. So what we did at the city is we took it seriously, looking at how do we get this back on track. And we invested in Communitech to bring it back to Waterloo. We invested in small business creation at the Accelerator Center to generate over 200 new companies, not jobs, 200 new companies. We're a strong city, and a strong economy is what we need to get to build a great city. And a great city should be great for all. That's why we also invested in historic investments in affordable housing and in a new hospice Waterloo Region site so people can spend their final days in peace. And that'll be going up right here beside Rim Park. And we're making all these investments while keeping property taxes low near the rate of inflation. So thank you for the opportunity to get Waterloo back on track. My name is Dave Jaworski, and I look forward to serving you in a second term.
Now to Regional Council candidate Sean Strickland.
Thank you, Jeff. It's been an honor and privilege to serve the citizens of Waterloo as a regional councillor since 2006. I believe there are three important issues that voters must consider when choosing a regional councillor: community service, experience, and ability. I have deep roots in our community. I attended grade school here, went to St. Jerome's at KCI, I'm a graduate of the University of Waterloo. I did postgrad work at Laurier, was a board member at Laurier, a board member at Grand River Hospital, minor sports coach, and I was executive director of the Food Bank of Waterloo Region for 13 years. I've served our communities as school board trustee, a city councillor, a regional councillor. I've chaired finance and admin and chaired community services committee as well. We have accomplished much over the years with ION, GRT, economic development, affordable housing, but much more work needs to be done. With my experience, my community service, and ability to work for you on October 22nd. To learn more about my vision for the future, please visit SeanStrickland.com. Thank you.
Now to Regional Council candidate Jane Mitchell.
In this time of change at the provincial and regional levels, it is important to have experienced and knowledgeable leadership. I am proud of my record. I am the chair of the Region's Licensing and Hearing Committee and successfully led council in the industry through the contentious process of updating the bylaw for taxis and legalizing Uber with an emphasis on consumer safety. I personally follow up on people's concerns. I care. I champion regional transparency. I work on numerous regional committees. I am the past chair of the Grand River Conservation Authority. For many years, I was the owner of an internet business, and we were a member of the chamber. In 2015, I supported the creation of the Waterloo Region Economic Development Corporation that presents a united front to attract business to the region. I convinced council to first invest in Communitech, and now they get $50,000 a year. The airport master plan looks at the airport growing when it has the business. One way this can happen is with the development of an aerospace industrial park. The region has racked up a AAA financial rating from Moody's every year I have been on council. I work hard, I lead, and I care. My website is janemitchell.ca. On the back of the card you can see all the other things I do. This particular speech was done for the chamber, but there's a lot of other stuff that I do.
Now to Regional Council candidate Jim Erb.
I've only had one job in my life, and that's a funeral director. I've successfully owned and operated Urban Good Family Funeral Home for 30 years, and I've been an active member in the community in many of the organizations which serve the most vulnerable in our community. While there are numerous issues which will be addressed in the question and answer period, I think the most significant issue this term is change. My friends Jane and Sean will tell you that this is not the time for change. We need experienced leaders. However, I beg to disagree with them. Public institutions like municipal councils are not private clubs. They're not closely held family businesses. And we need new people, new voices, and a new vision to bring some new ideas to the council table. The trains will keep running, the garbage will continue to be collected, the libraries will stay open, and the ION might continue running even if we have a new council member. The region will not fall into chaos.
And mayoral candidate Chris Koletnik.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Koletnik, and I'm running for mayor of Waterloo. Firstly, I would like to say thank you to the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce for hosting this debate. With that being said, the last 4 years have not been particularly kind to the citizens of Waterloo and the business community of Waterloo and Waterloo region. Citizens have faced a crippling tax increase of over 13% in just 4 years, double the rate of inflation. Public salaries at City Hall continue to increase while wages of our citizens continue to come down. Entrepreneurs have walked away from Waterloo, and businesses have shut down as a result of poor planning and a lack of vision from our so-called leaders at City Hall and the region. People should know I will be a business-friendly mayor, while being in favor of eliminating Waterloo's disastrous rental bylaw. I'm not here to rob people of their opportunities through policies that hurt our citizens and hurt our business community. I'm here to promote their success and their vision to make this an even better community. No city has ever prospered by putting its own citizens last. We don't have serious business people in this city anymore. We have socialist ideologues, failed executives, and people that couldn't even run a lemonade stand. So on October 22nd, vote for someone who cares about you. Vote for someone who's not agenda or union driven, but rather people driven. Vote for someone who wants to create thousands of jobs in our city while also bringing more family doctors to our region. So vote Chris Koletnik on October 22nd. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. We'll now get into the question portion of tonight's forum. And again, the first question will be answered first by Ms. Ann Zuby, Regional Council candidate. The question is as follows. Provincial legislation prohibits some qualified contractors from bidding on local construction projects due to their lack of affiliation with designated unions. Do you find the current legislative regime unfair and that municipalities should not be deemed as construction employers? And will you support any motions by Regional Council to correct this issue? Again, we begin with Ms. Ann Zuby.
So it's BSAN. I think this is a two-part question. So the first part of that question is I support our unionized workers. I have been honored to receive the endorsement from the Labor Council, the Waterloo Region Labor Council, and I take workers' rights seriously. I think coming from the labor movement in my background, I think that we need to make sure that people have a fair wage, that they're being protected at work, and that goes for all workers. One thing though that I will say is that right now our process, as I understand it, is lowest bid and unionized. My concern is though that if we are repeating different infrastructure projects because they are not being completed properly, I would like us to look into how we can make better investments and get a better quality of work by looking at different tenders and different kind of quality guarantees that come with different products. So while again I support unionized employees and unionized workers, I think we should also be looking at how we can deliver the best results for taxpayers, deliver the best infrastructure improvements that we can, especially as right now as we are looking at how our region is changing. We have an aging population. We'll need to be investing more into infrastructure, into these services. So we'll need to be looking at how these contracts are working. I think that making those investments are good for our region, they're good for our economy, they boost our economy, they make us more protected as citizens, and we need to be looking at how we are using that opportunity that we have as a region. And while I'm on the topic of infrastructure, I think we need to be looking at a lot of things and how we're giving out these contracts and how we're allocating contracts. I think we need to be looking at sustainability sustainability in our region, and if we're building that into infrastructure developments. I'm coming from a generation where I've been looking at climate change as an inevitable thing in the future, right? If we're not building that into our tender, into our kind of process of deciding which company is the best for our region, that's a blind spot. That's a total blind spot for us. So all I would like to say is that coming from my background, I think it's really important to maintain a level of quality, a level of service delivery, a level of infrastructure soundness for taxpayers and people alike. But I think we need to be looking at how we're pushing that further and really delivering the most effective and the most value for money for people so that we can keep doing that, we can keep growing as a region.
Mayoral candidate Dave Jaworski.
Well, fair and open tendering doesn't really roll off the tongue, but it's something that's important to all of us in municipalities that have been impacted by this inadvertent legislation. So it really comes back to Jeff's key phrase in Jeff's question, which is designated unions. This is not union versus non-union. This is a certain unions who have a leg up on literally everyone else. And so it's important for us to take action so we have the large number of bids that we wish to have for our construction projects so we can get the best value. Certainly unions provide great training and that's of great value, but there are literally other unions who are shut out of doing these types of bids. The other word was construction employer. And you only need to be at a municipality to see that we are far from being a construction employer. We provide emergency water pipe fixing. That's really what we do. We're experts in that. We can do some roadworks and pothole work, but literally everything else is outsourced to other groups that are, guess what, construction employers. And so legislation should certainly apply to them. So the change in regional chair, we'll have a new tone at the municipality. Certainly Ken Sealing had 33 years just in regional chair experience to do government relations. And so what I plan to do is to help the new incoming regional chair with my 15 years of government relations, lobbyist experience, to help the regional chair craft a plan to address this with our new provincial government. I think our new provincial government is looking for ways to make things more open, transparent, cost-effective, and I think this is the kind of work, fair and open tendering, that will resonate well with them and give better value to the citizens of the region of Waterloo.
Now to Regional Council candidate Sean Strickland.
Thanks. Municipalities are heavily unionized, as all of you know. Every direct employee of the city of Waterloo, of the region of Waterloo, is a member of a union, mostly QP, so public sector unions. The question really is, should municipalities also be obligated, if they're organized under the conditions of the Ontario Labour Relations Act and deemed a construction employer by the Ontario Labour Relations Act, is that really fair that municipalities have to not only have 100% unionized employees, direct hires, but also use unionized contractors to deliver their construction jobs? So this is an issue for the Ontario Labour Relations Board, and it is certainly an issue of fairness that many contractors who are not members of unions have raised to us. I think it's important to point out that the region of Waterloo is not alone. We have one collective agreement with the carpenters. The City of Toronto has 9 collective agreements. The City of Hamilton has an agreement, Sault Ste. Marie, Sudbury, all have agreements. So if this is to be resolved satisfactorily for all municipalities, it's going to require provincial legislation. And I understand that the Ontario Labour Relations Board has jurisprudence over this matter, and what it would take would be an amendment to the Labour Relations Act by the provincial government to deem municipalities non-construction employers. So it's pretty legalistic, and it is a lot of information that needs to happen and a lot of information exchanged between the different parties. I think it's important for the Labour Relations Board to make the appropriate ruling. I also think that the provincial government has legislation that will be introduced shortly so that municipalities will not have to conform to construction trade unions, and that'll be the responsibility of the province.
Now to Regional Council candidate Jane Mitchell.
Certainly this is something that I think the present provincial government will be something that they will do and probably think is a very good thing. To give you a bit of background on this, this happened when 2 men were building a shed on a Saturday, and one of them decided to become part of the construction union. And this is what led to us having all these particular problems. So obviously this is not fair. It's not fair to the other contractors, whether they have unions or not, and a lot of them do have unions. The provincial government has to change it so that we have fair and open tendering. It is causing, I think it's causing a bit of a problem. It's causing a bit of a problem because we can't get everybody giving us the tenders that we would like to see. And now these are only certain projects as well. There's a number of projects which don't fall into this. But still, this is something I think that our present government is probably something they would think to do, and it would make it much better for you as the taxpayers and us as the region to have much better, you know, when we're having infrastructure, that it would all be much better.
Now to Regional Council Candidate Jim Erb.
I fully support the region lobbying the provincial government for a fair and open tendering process. It's affecting people that are next door neighbors to all of us who are not able to, their companies are not able to bid on certain projects in the community, and it's not creating employment and wealth for some of the people that operate the businesses. The number of bids that have been received by municipalities in the region since this came into effect in 2014 has dropped by 50%. So that gives you an idea of the impact that it's had just on our community alone. And if you multiply that times other places in the province of Ontario, it's significant. So I think this deserves a fair and open conversation with the provincial government, and hopefully some changes can be made.
I was just going to say that the people that were endorsed by unions, obviously they're ducking the question, just to let you know. Unions inflate and they drive up costs. We need to have competitive bidding in this city and in this region. You're the ones who are being affected by the tax dollars. All the costs are passed back onto you. I'm a commercial realtor, I'm in the real estate business. How many people have sold their home here? Probably many, okay? You're not just calling one realtor, you're probably calling 2 or 3. You're seeing what they're offering you, you're seeing the commission rate that they're offering you, and you're trying to get the best for your bottom line. And that's what I intend to do when I'm elected mayor on October 22nd. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Oops, my apologies, Kelly. Now on to Kelly Stice.
One more. I'm number 7 here. And so you've heard lots of kind of complex complex considerations around this issue. But what I want to be able to do is to appeal in a way that benefits us all, because we need to bring this back locally. We need to look at the local impact of fair and open tendering on our municipality. And so for me, when we keep it local, we have environmental benefits. We're not bringing in labor and goods from other areas. We're keeping it local. That has economic benefits as well when we are employing our neighbors and our friends and those who live in our region. And then there's also pride in our work. If it's your neighbor that is building or contributing to a build, and you say, hey, how's that build going? Well, they certainly want to make sure that they've done a good job, because if that happens to fall apart, then we're going to be knocking on their door to say, hey, what happened there? I read an article that said it's not really about the money that we invest, it's about the engineering. So it is about the workmanship. And that is why we need strong leadership at our mayor's table and in our region to be able to work with our provincial government on behalf of the citizens of Waterloo. Because we need to make sure that we are advocating for what is best for our city.
Okay, thank you, candidates. On to our second question. This will be answered first by mayoral candidate Dave Jaworski. What are your priorities for economic development in Waterloo region, and do you support the Waterloo Economic Development Corporation's effort to bring in new investment to the region and retain existing businesses for growth and expansion? Again, we begin. Mayoral candidate Dave Jaworski.
Well, thank you, Jeff. In my opening remarks, I mentioned how a key feature of my last term of council was, my first term of council, was rebuilding prosperity. And I did that through a 4-point plan, keep, grow, start, and attract. So keep is to keep the businesses that we have, so to continuously have meetings with them, had about 300 meetings with different business leaders, perhaps 400 different meetings, each making sure that they have a chance to tell me what their opportunities, what their growth is like, and what challenges they're facing. Second part was to grow our businesses. As I mentioned, we invested in Communitech, we invested in the Accelerator Center to create about 200 new companies here in Waterloo, and that's through a City of Waterloo investment. We've also made a recent investment, Evolve, which will have a green incubator creating new companies focused on the environment. Start, that's something that we're doing through Communitech, as I mentioned, to start new businesses so that people can become more entrepreneurial, which is in our blood here in Waterloo Region. And then Attract, and Attract really falls into the Waterloo Region Economic Development Corporation, which was founded during this term of council. And what I would say is I'm proud of the entire community coming together. Everybody knows Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is a great place in California where it's essentially, we're second only to Silicon Valley in terms of our tech prowess, and we can be very proud of that. One thing we were missing was that brand. What's the brand that we represent? And if you think about it, it's really the strength of our educational system. So Canada's education city, and in particular, the University of Waterloo. Anything about the University of Waterloo? Of course it's in Waterloo. It's also in Kitchener, it's also in Cambridge. So through the Waterloo Economic Development Corporation, we've solved that brand recognition problem of having many different municipalities here. We have the Waterloo Region, the Waterloo Economic Development Corporation. So that's the word that we use, Waterloo, when we're out there trying to attract people to our Silicon Valley. We've made a number of economic development trips to Silicon Valley, to Germany in particular, where if you look at where our companies are from, where's our major investment coming from? It's actually from Germany, which is a surprise to most people. And the strength of our city here and our entrepreneurship is something that's being noticed. We need to take a look at either our quantum computing, Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics, as well as all of our entrepreneurship that we have going on in Waterloo, and I plan to continue that in my next term as council.
Now to Regional Council candidate Sean Strickland.
Thank you, Jeff. If anyone's been keeping my election literature since 2006, anybody been doing that? I've been talking about economic, oh, my wife raised her hand. I've been talking about creating one regional economic development corporation since at least 2006. It just did not make sense to me that we would have a Kitchener Economic Development Committee, a corporation, Waterloo Economic Development Corporation, and Cambridge Economic Development Corporation. And our economic development entities from each of the cities were actually competing against each other on a national, international stage, and it just didn't make sense. So I've been a strong advocate to form the Waterloo Region Economic Development Corporation for a number of years. And I was so pleased that we were able to finally get it done in 2015. And now we have one brand, one focus that we can bring to the international marketplace and say, we want you to come here and develop your business here, bring your business here, and hire our people here, because we sure have great workers, we have great skills, and we have a great knowledge base right here in Waterloo Region. And so our Executive Director of the Waterloo Region Economic Development Corporation has a strong background working for the Provincial Ministry on Economic Development, and I think it's important that we continue to maintain this investment in the Economic Development Corporation. But we have to do more than simply attract business. We also need, that's the kind of attractive, sexy thing, bringing new businesses in, and that's important, but it's only one component. We also need to retain business. So our existing businesses also need support, and that's where the local offices of the Waterloo and Cambridge and Kitchener really need to work with local businesses and pay those visits to the local businesses and find out what they need, find out what government can do, find out how they can leverage private sector investment to help their businesses grow. So that's an important component of economic development going forward. And in terms of jobs, I think that it's important to recognize that we all know how well our Communitech's doing, how well our high-tech sector's doing. If you go onto the website, I think there's probably 3,000 jobs that are unfulfilled right now for programmers and software developers. But what about diversity of jobs? We also need to recognize that we come from a strong manufacturing base here in Waterloo Region. We come from a strong agri-food base here in Waterloo Region. And we need to also attract those kinds of jobs into our community. A high-tech job's great, but not everyone can be a high-tech worker. So we need to have a diversity of jobs come into our region. That's why I think it's important for the Economic Development Corporation to focus on supporting our businesses in concert with local economic development offices, retain business and attract, but also attract diversity of jobs for all of our citizens. And I think as we go forward, we need to focus on Communitech, or that's the association, but high-tech jobs, agribusiness, insurance, and also manufacturing. Those are the real cornerstones of our prosperity here in the Waterloo region. We need to maintain that focus. Look at developing the business park at the Waterloo Region Airport. Lots of opportunity there. We have lots of interest in the land out there to bring new businesses and new manufacturing into our community. So there's lots more work to be done on economic development. We can't stand still, and it's easy to say we're prosperous, we're doing well, but we can't stand still because we all know the economy can turn on a dime. So we have to make sure we have that diversity of the workforce so we can withstand any kind of economic downturn. Thanks.
Regional Council Candidate Jane Mitchell.
Okay, that's a hard one to follow. Okay. In 2015, I also supported the creation of the Waterloo Region Economic Development Corporation. And as I mentioned earlier, I convinced council right at the beginning to first invest in Communitech, which now gets $50,000 a year from the region. The AAA financial rating from Moody's every year helps. And I've also supported the building of the Accelerator Center and the Research and Technology Park. I think we have to think about, Richard Florida said that universities and research are the mines and forests of the past. When we used to depend on mines and forests for all our things that we have, now we have universities and research, and that's what you have. And they're the resources of the future, so we definitely support our universities. But the other thing that was just mentioned briefly is we do have to make this a place where people want to come and have a job and stay. So we've done a lot with trails, with various types of transportation. We have to still make it a good place to live with arts and culture. We've done doctor recruiting, and we've got like the Master Medical School, the pharmacy, nursing, and so on, so that we have some of those other jobs that need to support the people that are working here, and all the different things that make it a good place to live. We have good schools already, but you know, we have parks and different things that people want. The final thing I think that I want to say is to just talk briefly about the ION, because it is actually, at this point, it is not even Merry Christmas, everyone, I really hope. But with the ION, it has so far brought $2.1 billion worth of development into Kitchener and Waterloo. So that tells you how important it is. You wouldn't think it would be important, but it is, because we can't just keep on having our roads clogged. We have to be able to get to Toronto and back. We have to have two-way, all-way trains and a variety, so that we can actually get our economy and the people that live here, that it's a good place to live and a good place with good jobs.
Thank you. Next to Regional Council Candidate Jim Herb.
I think the establishment of the Waterloo Economic Development Corporation was a great idea. I can't take credit for being a member of council when that took place, but I can take credit for being part of some community groups that were lobbying the region for 3 or 4 years that should happen. We need to sell the region of Waterloo as a single destination where people will come and invest and create employment opportunities for the people that live here. And it's not just a matter of having a business environment that is that's strong for attracting businesses here, because we also have to remember the family members that are coming here to support the person that's going to be working. And so we have to make sure that our education system, which is fine, which our healthcare system, which is strong, that our arts and culture continues to grow and become stronger, so that there's the other services here for the people who are going to be part of the families that move here for the employment, that it's an attractive community for them as well to grow here. I do question, though, however, why we still have separate economic development departments difference in the cities of Kitchener, Waterloo, and Cambridge. And I think we're stronger if we speak with one voice. I understand we have to support the local businesses in our respective communities. I'm one of them, and I get that. But I'm wondering if at some point in time we have to speak with one voice, that we can make it as clear as possible for the people who are intending to invest here. They understand that this is a single destination.
To mayoral candidate Chris Kalidnik.
So since day one, my campaign's basically been about jobs, jobs, jobs. What do people want at the end of the day? They want stability, security, and a good paying job. And I agree with Sean on a lot of the things that he said. We can't be just tech focused. Like he said, you know, not everybody wants to get into the tech community. I've got friends that are in sales, they're in manufacturing, they work in factories. 1 in 5 people in this region are still employed in manufacturing. Okay, so we have to have a diversified economy. Now, I've got 10 years of business experience. I've worked with international businesses that are locating here. I've worked with entrepreneurs all the way from 500 square feet to 10,000 square feet. I'm on the front lines of bringing jobs to this community, and I'm going to use those contacts to continually bring more jobs here. Now, we still have to lower our property taxes and our commercial taxes. I've seen property taxes as high as $130,000 in this city when I've sold some of these buildings. It's absolutely ridiculous. If we can lower some of these property taxes on our commercial folk, they can potentially hire more people, they can get more business in there, they can buy more products that will help their business and employ more people. So you can tell it's not just one thing, it's multiple things that bring jobs into our community.
Mayoral candidate Kelly Stice.
So I've been out and I've been speaking with developers, with investors, with business people in our community. And I've also been speaking with a lot of small businesses in our community, because for me, that is the core to how dynamic and unique the city of Waterloo is. We have a rich history of resilience. Through Rim Park, where other cities have faltered, where other cities, when they've lost a major employer, have crumbled and for some have gone bankrupt, Waterloo has remained resilient. And for that we must be proud. But we cannot rest on our laurels. We need to do more. We need to be active, we need to be proactive in how we leverage and secure new and different businesses in our city. Diversity is the key to that. We cannot rely on a single sector, we cannot rely on a single employer to carry us through. When we look at history in terms of economy, we need to make sure that we are leaders and that we have a strong presence in our region. It's not about competing with Kitchener, it's about complementing Kitchener. And there's often been that competition, but we don't have to do that. We can both be great, and when we are both great, we can actually help each other, move each other up and be a bigger presence and better presence in our city. We also need to support the diversity of investments and make sure that we have the ability to attract and retain both small business and large business in our city.
Thank you. And finally, regional council candidate Izan Zhu.
So I'm setting a timer on my phone just because I have so many things to say and I want to make sure I can get through them. So you've heard the words Communitech. I actually work at Communitech. I'm the Community Relations Manager at Communitech, where I work with our startups. We have over 900 startups in Waterloo alone. We have the second highest startup density in the entire world. I work with them to connect them with the community, to make them better players in our community so that we don't have a tech bubble that comes in and creates more inequality. When we talk about tech jobs, I don't want you to think that the 4,000 jobs that we have open are just software designer roles. For every engineering or software design role, there's dozens of jobs that are created. That's accountants, building managers, salespeople, facilities managers. We have a booming sector here, and it's not just one kind of job. So I want to make that clear about the tech sector. It's growth for a lot of different industries. I think that when I think about what I've been able to see and experience at Communitech, let me tell you about my day yesterday. I had people coming up from Toronto, from all over the world, who wanted to visit Waterloo because we are known as an innovation destination. I took them to Perimeter, I took them to the Institute for Quantum Computing, I took them to Google, and I took them to Communitech. What they said was they have never seen this much stuff in such a small place. We need to be proud of what we have, but we also need to make sure that we are letting our economy as a whole grow. So one thing that was brought up recently was the fact that when people move here, their spouses are often one of the reasons why they're more likely to leave, because we need to do a better job of integrating people to this community. We need to make sure that this is a fun and livable place for people, that people don't feel isolated and they don't feel like they're having trouble connecting with their community when they do come here. So things like getting around more easily, making sure that when the LRT trains finally do arrive, that service is enjoyable and it's actually something that people will leave their cars at home and take those trains, right? We also need to look at the region as a whole and how we're working as a single organism. We have branded ourselves as the region, Waterloo region, but we just say Waterloo now. We need to be able to say what's special about living in Cambridge, what's special about living in Waterloo, what's special about living in Kitchener. I actually have the experience of having moved here as a young professional. It was hard to find out what are the neighborhoods here? Where do I go for my morning coffee? We need to do a better job of sharing that with people. This is a great place to live. We need to be proud of that, and we need to be clear about what we offer people. Finally, I think that we need to look at how we are looking at innovating. I think we have been resting on the same ideas and the same policies for too long. We have a lot of opportunities with the Smart Cities program, with our tech sector. We can think about how we do policy better and kind of bring that holistic approach to innovation. So it's not just for the tech sector, it can be for government as well.
Moving on to the next question, and this answer will begin with Regional Council candidate Sean Strickland. The question as follows: another issue for municipalities across Canada is the provision of low-income housing. What do you propose to address the issue locally? Again, we'll start with Sean Strickland.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. We're recognized in the region of Waterloo as a leader in providing affordable housing right across the country. Since 2000, we have brought 2,500 new affordable housing units to the marketplace, and more work needs to be done. We have brought those housing units to the marketplace in an environment where we have to partner with community organizations to help build the affordable housing stock. Part of that 2,500 was also some that the Region of Waterloo directly built. So we need to address the fact that even though we build 2,500 affordable housing units, our waiting list has not decreased at all. Our waiting list has not decreased at all. So it remains a challenge, not only here in the Region of Waterloo, but right across Canada. And how do you provide adequate housing for people who live on lower limited income? And the problem and the challenge is getting more complex because it's more than just a bricks and mortar type of issue. We also need to provide supportive housing for people to move into housing so that they have the right kind of support so their move into housing will be successful. Poverty, homelessness, opioid crisis, the complexity of people who are living in poverty today is much more complex than it was even a number of years ago. So as the Region of Waterloo, we've done well. Our next plan is to build 500 more affordable housing units, but it's not enough. So what do we need to do to be more flexible? What do we need to do to be more innovative to attract more affordable housing stock into our communities? Well, there's a couple of things we could do. One is we've seen the change in our downtowns, as Jane referred to earlier, $2.1 billion in building permits and high rises. And 10 years ago, downtown Waterloo and Kitchener did not look anything like it does now. But that had an unintended consequence of moving some of that affordable housing stock out. So how do we replace that? How do we encourage developers to incorporate affordable housing into these new developments? And you can do that. There's provisions within the Municipal Act now where the city, not the region, where the city can say to a developer, okay, you want to build 16 stories. Let's say for argument's sake it's 100 units. Okay, we'll give you permission to build 100 units at 16 stories, but we'll give you one more floor at 10 more units if you make those 10 more units affordable housing. You don't put them on the top floor, but you intersperse them throughout the building. So there's an example that's been used in other big municipalities to help address affordable housing. The other thing that we can do is provide rent supplements. I chaired a service review in the region of Waterloo this past term. Some of those recommendations were implemented, some were not. One was that we needed to increase the amount of money that we give in rent supplements. So we can provide to low-income people who qualify extra dollars every month to help them go and find a place to live. That's a more cost-effective way than spending millions of dollars on new in-stock housing. I think it's part of the mix. I think we need to do both. We need to build more affordable housing in the region. We need to leverage the new development that's coming. And we also need to put income into people's pockets so they can use what's available in the private sector in terms of rent supplements. The other thing that we've done is we've announced a program of up to $25,000 to people who want to renovate part of their home and turn it into an affordable housing unit. So we're looking at different ways in which we can solve this complex community problem. And in the region of Waterloo, we're recognized as a leader on affordable housing, and with your support, we'll continue all of these efforts and much more as we go into the next term of council.
Next to Regional Council Candidate Jane Mitchell.
For the last 2 years, I've been a member of the Waterloo Region Housing Master Plan Committee, and we're working on regional housing, the housing owned by the region, and other ideas. So that report is going to be coming in January, and what we're looking at is redoing and restoring some of the older units and intensifying some of the units we have. We have a number of different ideas. One of the ideas is a little controversial, and I won't say where in the region because obviously we'd have to talk to people, is actually divesting or getting rid of, for instance, in some places, and I think you might know there's some in Waterloo, where there's a single home. And it's really not in super chic, but it could be sold and that money used for other projects that would be intensified and would be much better for people. If you think of David Street in Kitchener, where that's Kitchener housing, but that particular, there was some townhouses there that weren't in very good shape. So they were taken down by Kitchener housing, and they built a whole apartment building, and that apartment building is mostly for single people, which is one of our biggest things, and people that are disabled and need accessibility. So that's worked out really well. We need to have places near transit, so we're looking at making sure that there's transit, that people have said to me about, you know, there's the Ion, but as we just talked about, the Ion and on Weber Street, there used to be rooming houses there. They weren't very good rooming houses or very good places to live, but they were a place to live. They're gone now. Places like the Mayfair Hotel are gone now. So now we have to look at where are those people, where have they gone, where are they going to live? And that is a really big, important thing. And so we definitely need to be near transit, so it's not just the Ion, but also buses and I-Express so that people can get around. Something we haven't really talked about is homelessness, which I know a lot of people are very concerned about, and we are too. And what we're looking at is, and I will say this again and again, a lot of people who are homeless, they're homeless for a reason. And some people don't like me to say that, but it's true. You're homeless for a reason. And what we need is and I've talked to the people at Show about this, they've talked to me actually about it, come to me and talk to me about it, is that we need more. They have their one apartment, they're now doing a second one, everybody buy a brick, I have. And what we need to do is have supports for people, because the people that go there, they perhaps have mental illness, they've been homeless for a long time, so it's hard to learn how to live again in an apartment, in a place. They just need to, things like somebody to talk to instead of phoning an ambulance or phoning the police, that there's somebody that you can talk to and work out your problems. So in fact, what happens is when we have places like Show, it reduces the number of EMS calls, the number of police calls, the number of support calls. So they're very good. We need more of them. This is part of the plan that we're looking at, is to work with the homeless. We also have at the region and with our partners working on getting people who are homeless, getting them housed. And every month we have about 5 or 10 people that are housed that have been chronically homeless, and it's working very well. There's not a lot of families anymore. There was a problem with families. It changes every year. One of the things that we need to really think about as well is the opioid crisis and what's happening
Sorry,
with
Jane,
that.
just run a little.
And we might have a question on that later.
Thank you. We'll now go to Regional Council Candidate Jim Murray.
I think everyone deserves a safe place to sleep at night. It's a human right that we owe to everyone that lives in our community and everyone lives in the world. And it's hard to attain. It's a complicated issue of providing housing to people who are suffering with mental illness issues, unemployment, a variety of things. However, it's something that we need to give a priority to. If any of you look at any of my campaign literature, it's number one on my list. It's something that's very important to me. I've spent many hours in the last number of years working with the House of Friendship and the Working Center, and before that, Habitat for Humanity, trying to raise money and provide resources in the community where people can live that can't afford a regular home in a subdivision. The construction of the LRT has made a significant difference to people in our community who need to have housing that is subsidized. And now we want to have this conversation that we want to create this affordable housing so that people can get on the grid system and get into the LRT and get transportation, because they're not going to be able to live around it because of the price. Why didn't we know that 10 years ago when we started planning the LRT? Why are we having that discussion now? Why weren't the people who had the responsibility to plan it, to implement it, having that discussion? And why are we being reactive to something when we should have been proactive? So I think we have a tremendous challenge ahead of us to deal with the homelessness and the housing and the affordable housing issue. We're going to be responding to something that we've created. And there's a conversation that has to be held in this community as to how we're going to do that, and I don't think it's going to be that easy. So I'm frustrated that we're at this point of having the conversation after the infrastructure has been in place, but I'm hopeful that the provincial government, the federal government, and the goodwill of the people in the community and the region will be equal players at the table so we can create safe places for people to live.
Like Jim and Jane, I think this is a very important topic. The number of people that are on affordable housing, it's actually increased from about 3,200 to about 4,000 people. So it is a very significant issue in our city and in the city of Kitchener and in the city of Cambridge. Like Jim said also, is that there's been a lot of construction along the Ion. Obviously we've seen a lot of construction in Kitchener as well. We've seen all these buildings go up, but they never ever talked about affordable housing or anything like that. This really stems down to supply and demand issue. We have to find locations in our city to actually build these projects who are waiting on this list. One of the things that I've recommended is that if you look at the King and Columbia area, for example, some of these buildings are only occupied between 60 and 70%. They're student-dominated buildings, right? Why not subsidize some of these buildings for single mothers or families in transition? I think that they would be good for the community. It's already built, it's purpose-built. Some of these units have between 3 bedrooms to 5 bedrooms. So that's one thing that we can potentially look at a building that's already there. One of the things that I'd also want to eliminate, we're basically passing policy that are hurting people. So if you look at Waterloo's rental bylaw, on average, that adds $100 per month to someone's lease agreement of rent, right? So that's $1,200 a year that they could be paying towards utilities, towards bills, towards investing in themselves, towards education. So we're robbing people of these opportunities. I don't think it's right. It's something that I would work with the next term of council in eliminating. We got to stop passing these policies that hurt people. One of the things that is coming to board is also inclusionary zoning. So whether the next term of council dictates that to a developer is yet to be seen, but that's something that we can use in our toolbox to help for those waiting on the affordable housing list.
So Jeff, when you asked the question about low-income housing, for me this brings up 2 issues. One is something that we talked a lot about already, which is subsidized housing. And we've got lots of great ideas about some fundraising opportunities to contribute personally to that. And there's certainly been identified a list of options that are available, current service providers in our community. But we need to make sure that we offer a diversity of options for people who need to live on a subsidized income. I don't think it's appropriate that we house people in a single area and corral people in a certain building. Because for me, this is about a quality of living issue, and it's about how we care for others in our community that really makes a difference. There is within the purview of municipal government to make some legislation and, thank you, sorry, I just got distracted there. But it's also about our municipal government providing the leadership to make things happen so that we provide a variety of options available for people who require subsidized living. The other issue around when I hear about low-income housing is affordable housing for new people who want to live in our city. And right now, when I have been out and talking to new graduates in our city, and recently there was an article, and it was more online with the record, the online version of the record. It showed that only 26% of people are staying in our city post-graduation. They are moving to Kitchener and they're moving to Cambridge because that's what they can afford. And I think that that is not okay for me. We want to be able to retain the talent. We want to be able to create an affordable situation so that people can live and move and live in our city. And for me, that's important because if we don't have new grads being able to afford to live here, then who is going to be able to afford to live here in our city? So we need to pay attention to what we're doing. We need to pay attention to the taxes, to how we spend our money, and making sure that we find ways to attract and retain all kinds of people to live in our city.
Thank you. Now to Regional Council Candidate Izanzu.
So I think that affordable housing has been one of the premier issues of this campaign. I'm hearing a lot of concern about it, and I echo that concern. I actually live on King Street across from an LRT stop. I know that my old building is going to be quickly turned into condos. Give it a year or two, I'll be evicted, right? I'm coming from that perspective. I know what's going to happen. On one side, I think that there's 8 units in my low rise, and that could be a much more densely populated building. It would make sense. It's right across from an LRT stop. People need to be there. But on the other side, what's going to replace it? How much is that going to cost? Who's going to live there? What kind of a community are we creating? If we create these glass towers where only people who are paying $1,500, $1,700 a month in rent can afford to live, I don't think that there's a diversity in that community. I don't think there's vibrancy in that community. So we want to make sure that whatever we are building, where we are moving, where we are kind of putting our future in, we want to make sure that that's an inclusive future, that that has mixed use, so that we have a mix of traditional and affordable units. And I don't think that developers are going to do that out of the kindness of their own hearts. Maybe they will, but really what we need to do is incentivize that for them. We need to make it worth their time, worth their money. So we need to look at, in addition to bonusing, how can we make this an appealing prospect for developers? So things like, I think that a little PR goes a really long way, and I think a little appreciation for that stuff goes a long way. And I think we need to also be looking at funding sources. To be honest, I don't see that coming from our current provincial government. I don't think that they've stated that that's their priority, but I think we would have a lot more room to grow with the federal government in terms of getting that affordable housing money. So that's where I would go as a regional councillor, to that bucket, and see how we can get more investment in our region about affordable housing from them. I am concerned by the fact that there are thousands of empty apartments by the university, whereas I get told by university students all the time that they can't afford to live in those new buildings. So we have to think about who are these buildings being built for, and why are we accepting as a community that they're being left empty? I spoke with Carl Cadigan, who's the executive director of Reception House, which helps settle government-assisted refugees in our community. And he has told me he is frustrated with the fact that he can't get his families in on any of these buildings, even on a temporary basis, because they are just not being a cooperative. We need to be looking at how are we as a community coming together and dealing with this problem. The fact that we have 50-something tent cities across our region is unacceptable. It's unacceptable that we have so much wealth and so much prosperity and people are living in tents beside railway tracks, behind apartment buildings, behind buildings. We can do so much better as a community. So I really think that the solution to a lack of affordable housing is looking at what we have now, looking at where we want to go, and actually pushing and making those things happen that we can grow in that way. I don't want to create affordable housing ghettos. I want it to be integrated in all of our communities. They need access to public transportation. No one needs access to public transportation more than people who need affordable housing. So we need to be thinking about this as far as the region is concerned, holistically, and not just doing this piecemeal stuff here and there, and have a plan for it.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff, and thanks for the question on low-income housing. It's really about a housing continuum that we care about here at this table, from solving homelessness and their shelter system, all the way up to seniors housing, which is another expensive issue. And as my colleagues have mentioned, the free market, we have very little tools to work with from the province. And if you look at provinces where they look after housing, this is the one where it's been downloaded to the regional government. So it's something that we now have to take care of, along with the funding that they provide to us. So it's something that's very important for us to use our government relations experience to advocate for more funding from the federal government, more funding from the provincial government, so that we can do more. To advocate for new programs, like the one that was mentioned earlier, inclusionary zoning. So it's only now that there's a new tool from the province where we can actually require people who are building towers to have a certain percentage in them. Before that, the free market rule, there was nothing that we could do other than incentives to create that. And we're working with the City of Kitchener because we both believe that this needs to be done, particularly along the Ion route. And we're looking to make this happen within 1 or 2 years, as soon as we can, once we follow all the rules as set out by the provincial government. One tool that we can use to incent is called density bonusing. When somebody wants to build more units on a piece of property, they're allowed, for example, in the Northdale neighborhood in the University District. And there's one great success story where a developer contributed $600,000 to pay off, essentially pay off the mortgage of the YWCA family site on Lincoln Road. And we can be very proud that in the city of Waterloo, and within our borders, it was a historical investment term for affordable housing with supportive housing of Waterloo, the YWCA, and there is an inspired developer in town, like Maxwell and his family. They're putting up a 32-unit apartment building on right near the Shoppers Drug Mart on Weaver Street. We all be proud as people who are giving back like that. And this wouldn't be complete without doing a shout out to Habitat for Humanity. I see the new Executive Director, Karen Cian's here. These are all the kinds of things that we need to get up in the morning and look in the mirror and to say, how can I make a difference? How can the government make a difference? But how can I make a difference as well? And you can go to their websites and make a contribution to help those less fortunate in our community who really need a hand up through these great groups. There's over 2,000 charities that we have within the Waterloo region.
Thank you, candidates. Let's now move on to a question on transit. As a member of Regional Council, one of the issues that will likely come up in the next term is Phase 2 of the Ion Light Rail Transit. Do you support the extension of light rail transit into Cambridge? And if so, by what date? Again, this question will be answered first by Regional Council candidate Jane Mitchell.
Okay, it's very interesting. All 4 regional candidates do support the extension of the LRT and the Ion into Cambridge, and I certainly support it. When we very first did stage Phase 1, we said at that time that we wanted to have it all the way to Cambridge. I think as people can understand, when we've got 2.1 million worth of development in Kitchener-Waterloo, Cambridge needs that development too. They need to have things working for them as well. So right now, we are at the stage where we're going through the environmental assessment, which you have to do provincially. We've also got the route pretty much, it's okay. And there's still a few things, and there's been a lot of public input on that route and where it should go. One of the public input was down in Cambridge. It was going to go through a historical area, and thank goodness that was changed, so it went to a different area. So it's a lot of money though, and we can't do that alone. We can't, and I know sometimes people say, well, you could just pay for stage 2, but as you can understand, the first one was $1 billion, this one will be $1 billion. You don't want to be paying all that much money on the property tax. So we need to have the federal government come to the table and the provincial government come to the table. I would really like, we have Hamilton and I believe it's Brampton have been offered, we're offered 100% for LRT. Brampton turned it down. Hamilton seems to want to turn the money down. So if they want to have it come our way, I'm good with that. Because what I see right now is we're moving ahead. We know where we want to go. The city of Cambridge knows where they want to go, but we need the money. And so when you say what time, I'm not thinking maybe in the next 4 years, unless we have to do our lobby. We have to really lobby. We have to really work with the province and the federal government and make sure that we get that money so that we can do this for Cambridge. Because it only makes sense that you're starting in Waterloo and you go all the way down to Cambridge. And I do travel on the bus, and I do travel down to Cambridge. I travel down to the Grand River Conservation Authority by bus. And it's great, but it would be a lot faster if we were on an island. So it is my hope that stage 2 will come. I'm thinking maybe 8 years, because you have 4 years, then you get the money, and then there's the time to build it, and so on. I often talk to people about when I went to China, and we were going by, we were in Beijing, and our guide said to us, well, here's our new subway stop and our new subway, and we're going to build it in a year. And she showed us the hoarding. And the reason they're able to build it in a year is because they are not a democracy. And what happened was, they said to that area, to the people that lived there, we're building a subway station and you have to move. We will give you a small amount of money, but you have if you're a historic area, too bad, we don't care. That's where we're going to put it, and that's where it's going to go. We are democracy, so that's why it's taken since 2010 for us to get the LRT going. And it's a good thing. Democracy is a good thing, because at the end, I think you end up with something better that people like, but it does take a little time.
Thank you. Now to Regional Council Candidate Jim Erb.
Jeff, I'm not going to answer the question related to timing. There's been a number of delays and hiccups in this construction here, and I don't want to have that on my record if I get elected, so the sooner the better. I'm a strong supporter of the LRT being extended to Cambridge. I think it's important that the region, the 3 major urban centers, be connected with a seamless transportation system to create a better connection. I think what we need to do as a region is lobby and build up a good communication with the current provincial government to make sure that they fund this 100% like they have done in other municipalities in the province. While we could afford to pay for this last system, I'm not sure if the strain can be put on the citizens for another $1 billion expenditure. I think what's really important is that if this construction does happen, we have to learn from the lessons that maybe, or some of the mistakes that were made when this current system was built. I sat inside my office window for 2 years and King Street was closed. I didn't have very many people or councillors from the region of Waterloo call me to find out how it was affecting the business. The routing of detours and where people could go was a nightmare. And we need to do a better job at communication. We profess as Waterloo to be the most intelligent city in the world, with all the high-tech capabilities that we have. And the communication to me was just not adequate at all, and we deserve better. So I do hope those lessons that there are some of the mistakes that did happen with the construction in Kitchener-Waterloo are taken into consideration and used so the citizens of Cambridge do not share the same frustrations that we did.
Wait, there's more.
Take it off my time. And so let's just reflect back for a second on the conversation about affordable housing. So we know the impact that's had in Kitchener-Waterloo with the displacement of people along the new line. So let's start thinking about that in Cambridge. And rather than talking about replacing the units, let's take an inventory of the units that are there right now that may be displaced. And how are we going to plan and how are we going to replace those units in the city of Cambridge? And so let's do it. We need it. We need to tie the 3 urban centers together. But let's learn from our mistakes and try and communicate better with the community.
Now to mayoral candidate Chris Glenn.
So I'm probably going to be the contrarian on this panel. I don't support LRT going into Cambridge. We saw what a travesty the LRT was in Waterloo and Kitchener the last 4 years. Businesses shut down, even Jim like said. The regional councillors, the mayors, they never came and they never talked to these businesses. They've lost thousands of dollars weekly. What I would like to actually see done, if we're actually going to spend $1 billion from Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, I'd rather see that go towards high-speed rail. I don't support ION into Cambridge unless it's 100% federally or 100% provincially funded. Our taxpayers have basically been hit too hard the last 4 or 5 years under this current administration, and I won't support any extension going into Cambridge. Thank you.
Councillor Mayoral candidate Kelly Stice.
So I understand and I appreciate the concept of an integrated system and the development of that system, is making sure that Cambridge is included in our transit system. But what I heard about our current LRT is that people feel that they weren't listened to and heard. And we may realize some of the benefits of our LRT moving forward, but right now, as we've talked about, we're pushing it to think that we're even going to get a train in December. So to start to think about how is Cambridge going to be serviced seems a little bit premature. I also feel a little bit, I guess I would say arrogant for me to sit up here and to say how I would decide for the citizens of Cambridge. And what I want to make sure is that as a member of regional council, that we really provide some opportunities for Cambridge to feel listened and heard, and to maybe have a different experience that many of us have had through this LRT development. We also need to look at what is that pathway, what is the route going to look like in Cambridge. I don't understand the route that we have in Kitchener-Waterloo. For me, I would say that it looks like a real estate development deal. It did not look like a transit initiative, and even when I looked at the city of Nashville, when they were presented with the option of an LRT deal, they turned it down because it was more about real estate development than about transit efficiencies. So I think we've made some mistakes, and I think Jim is right around we need to look at our lessons learned. I think we need to challenge ourselves. I think we need to be critical. And I think we need to be humble about what do we need to do moving forward so that we create a system that is cost effective for us as citizens, because it's going to go back on our taxes. And I also want to make sure that I don't make decisions on behalf of the citizens of Cambridge. As a member of regional council, we do participate in those decisions, but I want to make sure that they are listened to and heard, and making sure that we spend our money wisely.
So in short, yes, in theory, I agree with the extension of LRT into Cambridge. Like Jim, I don't really think I will be held to a timeline. There's so many things outside of our control right now, and so I don't think it would be wise to make a promise that I have absolutely no capability of holding, right? What I do want to talk about, though, is the fact that we don't even have these trains. We're already talking about phase 2. Phase 1 isn't done yet. Can we talk about phase 1? Because I'm waiting for those trains because I don't drive a car. This is going to be my method of commuting. I live on King Street. I will be taking those trains to work in downtown Kitchener. I'll be taking them to the mall. I will be enjoying that opportunity when it finally arrives. But when it does arrive, I want to make sure that those trains are full, that we have people using those trains, that we're recouping the money that we have lost in just waiting. We've been waiting for 18 months, and I'll be honest, I don't think we're getting all the communication we could be getting from the region right now on if we'll even get them in December. That was the last official word, but you know, we don't even have all the trains here. I think we all kind of know it's a bit of a story right now. So I think that we need to be realistic about what we can do without even seeing how that operation manages itself in the meantime, right? So when I talk about ridership, I want to make sure that the people who need to be taking the train every day to work, who rely on that as an essential service, have access to it. That to me is a priority. I want to make sure that students use it. They actually have built into their student fees on their one card or on their passes, they have bus passes, they have transit passes. But if we're not creating schedules that actually work for them, they're not going to use it either. I want to make sure that as we are looking at that service, that it's as accessible to get onto a train. So let's look at what does it look like on King Street when it's winter, when there's snow on the ground? Because it is a pain even crossing the street. If you are on a regional road like that, there's no snow clearing on sidewalks. So you have to jump over a mini mountain of snow anytime you want to even access a bus or access the street. It's not acceptable, and these are barriers of actually getting riders on these trains. I want to look at why do none of the LRT stops that I've seen have bike racks? People can bike to those trains, walk their bike, and then take the train on a longer kind of trip. If we create that infrastructure, they'll use it. But right now, it's pretty bare, it's pretty lacking. I'm not going to promise to you that we're going to have service in December. Unlike some candidates who have actually put that on our website saying that the trains will be here in December, we can't ensure that. But the last thing I want to say is, if I was elected, I would rethink, if we did go through with phase 2, I would rethink going with Bombardier at all, / not go with Bombardier again. We had no reason to be surprised by the fact that those trains were late. That's their reputation. So I think that's a huge mistake that Regional Council made in tendering that deal to Bombardier. I understand Canadian jobs are important, but how many local jobs were lost? How many local businesses went under because we chose a Canadian business with a bad reputation over an international business with a reputation of delivering trains on time? So that is one thing that I would look at doing much differently if elected.
Well, thank you, Jeff. If we go back into the history, the Central Transit Corridor, I think, was first foreseen in 1976. So to put that in perspective, it predates Ken Seelig being chair of the region. So it's been around for a while, so we do need to build it out. But really, step one is to build ridership on ION Phase 1. Ridership of an LRT, I phoned around to City of Calgary, City of Edmonton. When they built theirs, their target ridership was about 28,000 people. That's really what you want to get out of that. And I have some great news, because we're building it on an existing area along the spine of Kitchener and Waterloo, that we already have 20,000 transit riders in that area. So immediately we will displace 22 diesel spewing buses, and we will have already 75% of the target ridership rate out of the gate. You can also look to the fact that Conestoga recently voted to join Laurier and the University of Waterloo students in getting a transit pass mandatory for all their students. So today we have about 50,000 students in the Waterloo area who have transit passes. That will add an enormous number down in Doon and in Cambridge. But also, Conestoga College will have its grand opening of its new site here in Waterloo on University Ave, which will add another 4,000 students who will automatically have transit passes. So I think we're in good stead. But we must continue to build that ridership, because that builds the revenue for the system. And finally, I think the system needs to be 100% funded. That's been put out there. That's been set as the bar from the province and the federal government. And so that's what we really need to see, is 100% funding of phase 2. And I would plan to use my government relations experience to help advocate for that.
Finally, Regional Council Candidate Sean Strickland.
Oh, wow, when you go last, there's lots to respond to. First of all, in terms of taking your bike on the trains are designed so you take your bike on the train. right? You can ride the train with your bike with you. So that's really acceptable transportation. When it comes to awarding the contract to Bombardier, it's easy to have 20/20 vision in hindsight. At the time, when I supported the contract with Bombardier, they had a good track record of delivering these trains on time. We piggybacked on the procurement with Metrolinx and TTC, so we're able to save millions of dollars by piggybacking on that procurement. In hindsight, obviously Bombardier has not delivered to the level that we had anticipated they would. The good news is we have 12 rail cars right here in Waterloo region, just a kilometer or so away from us right now. So I think those are a couple of things we need to keep in mind. And let's just take it back a step in terms of what the real purpose of the LRT is. We focus on ridership, which is really important. I'll talk about that in a minute. But this is an urban planning tool. We talk about the countryside line. We all talk about how much we love living in Waterloo region because you're 10 minutes from the countryside. And who doesn't like going for a drive in our beautiful country outside of Waterloo region? So the LRT was a way for our community to grow up and not out. We established in our official plan an official plan on the countryside line, so no development can occur beyond the countryside line. That is a very progressive planning instrument for municipalities in the province of Ontario. We did not want to repeat what you've seen in Toronto and Mississauga and Vaughan, where they have unbridled growth, houses up to the 401, countryside destroyed. So we said we're going to protect our countryside. But in order for a community to still grow, we need something to anchor development in our cores, and that's where the LRT came from. It's a people mover for sure, but it really is about urban planning, and so we can grow up and not out. A couple things about phase 2. First of all, we need to get ION right. We need to operationalize phase 1. We need to get it up, we need to get it operating. We need to integrate it with GRT, and that work's already happened. We're changing our bus system from a hub and spoke model to running along corridors into a grid pattern, feeding into the LRT. Right now, last year we had 28 million riders on GRT, compared to maybe 10 or 12 million riders years ago. Ridership is increasing. And once we get LRT in place, we're going to have the bus lines to feed into the LRT. So we need to make sure that's important. We need to make sure we get phase 1 right. And then we need to also make sure we debrief what we learned from phase 1. Communication needs to improve. I personally, with the support of council, in the last few months have asked for updated public reports on production from Bombardier. They're located on the region's website, they're located on my website. It may have some small part to play in making sure Bombardier's picked up and improved their act a little bit. It's good to see we have 12 cars here. And in terms of communication, you always do better communication. But you look at our Twitter feed, you look at our Facebook page for ION, we have multiple thousands of people, thousands and thousands of people who are communicating every day, but we can always do better. Finally, when it comes to phase 2 into Cambridge, we're going to get phase 1 right. Phase 2 into Cambridge is a lukewarm proposition for the citizens of Cambridge. I supported it. When we first passed the motion to approve phase 1, I said we need to also consider phase 2. But if you ask the citizens of Cambridge, they would much prefer to have a GO station in Cambridge. They would much prefer to have all-way, all-day GO, as would we in Kitchener-Waterloo. So I think this is something we need to look at into the future. I think it's something our community needs, but we have a lot of steps and a lot of things we need to achieve before we seriously consider spending dollars on phase 2, which, by the way, I don't think we should spend. The province is 100% after we led the way, like we usually do in the region of Waterloo. We need to get provincial and federal funding. Thanks, Jeff.
Moving on to the next question, a timely question. If you've seen the newspaper or heard the news, you turn on a TV, you'll know that cannabis is now legal. How should Regional Council and the City of Waterloo address concerns around the legalization of cannabis, and would you support opting in or opting out of allowing physical stores in Waterloo? We begin the answers of this question with Regional Council candidate Jim Herb.
So is this something you want rolled out? Well, thanks for having an easy question to me at the very beginning on a very timely time. My concern would be that if the City of Waterloo does not opt in, the black market would continue to flourish. And I think one of the concerns that we all have, particularly for those of us that have young families and grandchildren is the access to it and the safety. And so I think my preference is that the City of Waterloo would opt in and have some locations where it could be sold privately. My preference would have been that the province would have accepted the recommendation of the previous provincial government and would have been sold in places like the LCBO stores where they would have had more control. I think that was the best. And if we don't have the private locations, you're going to be able to buy it online anyways, or you're going to be able to drive maybe to Kitchener or to Cambridge and buy it if the City of Waterloo doesn't opt in. So my preference would be to have it sold in locations that can be regulated, where we can see what's happening, and that we know what's going on there.
Thank you. Now to mayoral candidate Chris Kalendek.
What a budding question there. Let me preface by saying, whether you have a moral argument or a moral causation against legalized marijuana, I'm probably on your side. First of all, I don't think that it should have been passed. I think it's going to create a lot more problems than it actually serves. With that being said, we still need to have a community-based discussion whether we're actually going to opt in or out of it. I would probably opt in, but I would opt in the industrial malls section of Waterloo itself. This way you're taking it off retail streets. Kids can't see it or anything like that, but I'm not naive enough to know that there's students in grade 5 and 6 already smoking this stuff, right? So you got to put it in industrial malls. You got to let people, quote unquote, have their medicine or their recreational marijuana. What people should know about me is I'm a free market guy. I'm a business guy at the end of the day. If we can create more jobs and opportunities for people in private ventures, then I'm all about that. But again, we still need to have a community-based discussion if we're in fact going to opt in, but I most likely would. Thank you.
Mayoral candidate Kelly Stice.
Sorry, I've got no puns for you. That's not my skill set. I'll leave that to other people. So I think for me, before we opt in, I want to make sure, and I don't know that it's been discussed yet, is what is the financial benefit for us in the city of Waterloo and in our region by opting in. I think it's good, but I think I'm curious as to why we haven't talked about that, because there's going to be a downloading of responsibilities within our region with respect to the sale of marijuana. And so I think to be prudent, we need to make sure that we understand what it is that we will receive as a benefit for doing that. We also need to make sure that we have looked at all of the ins and outs of that around, just today the Waterloo Police Services released their statement on how they want to address it, and talking about that fit for duty. And we need to make sure that we've looked at what are the limitations that we would have within our city. Right now, you can only, smoke it, or if it's in your residence, but it hasn't talked about people who rent. And so how are we applying that equally and fairly in our city? And then again, looking at people who do need to use it for medical purposes. I know often they don't smoke it because that's just not an ideal way to use it, but there's been lots of helpful tips in the media lately on how you can use it. So for me, I would say, yeah, let's opt in, but let's do it wisely. Let's make sure that we have vetted all of the policy, and make sure that we end up with the advantages and with the resources required to be able to deliver that well.
Regional Council candidate Sanzu.
Quickly, I would be in favor of opting into physical stores. I think if we didn't, that would be a blank spot that we have that other cities that are around us just wouldn't have. It doesn't make sense for us to handicap ourselves in that way when this is something that is across Canada and it's now legal. I want to talk a little bit, though, about what we can do to mitigate some of the negative effects of marijuana use, especially in our younger population, because when we have more access to it, it's more visible. We need more education about it. When it was illegal, it's kind of like abstinence-only sexual education, where if it's illegal, you're only being told you can't do it, right? You're not being told, well, how do you, how is this safe? How can you be as responsible with it? We also know that it really negatively affects young minds, so we need to make sure that kids aren't accessing it, that we have an open and transparent way of saying to children that even though this is legal now, it's still not for you, same as alcohol, right? Like, we need to have that go to younger people too. I think we need to think about also how we over-criminalize things, right? Prohibition era alcohol, we used to treat alcohol the same way we treated marijuana, right? But then the government stepped in and started LCBOs, and it became seen as a more of a normal thing. I'd like to think about how many, I mean, it was a good announcement from the federal government that they are expunging the records of people who were convicted for, minor marijuana offenses, because it comes to a point where we need to be looking at what is a police matter and what's a public health matter, and what's a matter for education and for our school systems to be teaching, right? I think we can do a lot more to have a smart approach to it, a wise approach to it, without kind of creating this forbidden fruit that makes kids more likely to smoke. I think that there's a financial benefit to opting in to having those physical stores. There is a tourism element that we could be taking advantage of, and there's also the opportunity that we've seen some of our agricultural communities in actually growing it. So there's been millions and millions of dollars of investment in Guelph and in very close to us in terms of growing marijuana. So I think that as a region, we can be smart about it. We can educate people on the safe way to consume it, while still kind of stepping into this new policy that the Canadian government has decided is in the best interest of Canadian citizens.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and thank you for this morning on 570, trying to hunt down people who've already used the online site and trying to find some who've been ordering already. This is a very complex issue, and it continues to evolve literally on a daily basis. Certainly it's impacting us financially at Waterloo Regional Police Service with all the extra training that they've had to do for all the officers. It's affecting us at a bylaw level in the city of Waterloo, because what's going to happen is you're going to go sit out on your back deck, you're going to be there playing with the grandkids, and smoke's going to come over the fence. You're going to call our bylaw people, and we're going to tell you there's nothing we can do. And that is so sad. The fact that these will have impacts from balcony to balcony, deck to deck. And I say it's continuously evolving because originally the province had said, we'll have one store, and we're going to make it mandatory, but you'll have lots of choices. And so from a city perspective, we took those lots of choices and ended up looking towards an industrial area, a more industrial area, very far away from schools, all vulnerable people, and try to put it out of the way to have their first one because it was mandatory. So now it's no longer mandatory, but we're going to have this opportunity to have them anywhere. We have, I think, until January 22nd to opt out. So the community conversation is going to happen quick. But what we're finding now is that some of the deals may not be so good. So the revenue sharing, of which they promised, so the federal government gave 75% to the provinces. How much will come to the municipalities who are caught holding the bag? You're going to get at least $5,000. So City of Toronto gets at least $5,000. That'll go a long way towards nothing. Of the $40 million, it's over 2 years for all municipalities, and there's no guarantee beyond 24 months. So if you choose not to opt out, in other words, opt in, you're going to have all these stores pop up, because what you're finding is that licensing and zoning, the province is choosing to override our licensing and zoning. So perhaps a store, a variety store, may decide to carry cannabis across from Sir John A. Macdonald Public School High School. We've already seen the province where they've gone on the point where saying, well, really, if you can smoke, you really can smoke anything, anywhere. And now they're trying to rethink that. But we don't know where they're going. And so to opt in on something that we don't know whether we're going to be able to share revenue, whether they're going to be putting them across from schools, and at this point in time, we're only talking about smokable or cannabis and smokable. In a year, we're going to have edibles. So those gummy worms that your grandkids and kids are using, they aren't going to be candy, they could be cannabis. And so now you're going to have teachers dealing with kids eating gummy worms in school. How do they police that? Do I really want to have this store so close in a certain area? Or maybe we leave it at where it is in the online ordering, and you have to get it at a house, and it has to be, I don't know how they can control that, but Anyway, maybe we leave it at that, so it's not enticing for people just to drop into a store, pick up a pack of gummy worms, and head back to school. So very complex. Next term of council, we'll have to figure it out very quickly, so pay attention over Christmas time because we'll be doing consultations then. Thank you.
Regional Council Candidate Sean Strickland.
Just be careful when people offer you brownies. I think that it's really changed. If you would have said, if someone would have said to me in 2014 that I would be an all candidates debate in 2018 on the day that marijuana was legal in Canada, I would have asked them, like, what are you smoking? Like, really? Like, it's changed. It's changed. Our society's changed. Our values have changed. And this is a huge societal issue for us going forward, but it's here, so how do we deal with it? I think that the province made a mistake by making it available in retail stores. I think it would be better to be run by the Ontario Cannabis stores, which I understand now are able to order online. So this question of opting in or opting out may be somewhat of a moot point if people decide to place most of their orders online, which is perfectly legal as of today as well. Opting in or opting out is a city decision, it's not a regional decision. Recently, as last week, we made some policy changes so that smoking cannabis would be restricted in all regional buildings. We also made it that for all of our affordable housing units that you weren't allowed to smoke cannabis indoors. The same way you're not allowed to smoke cigarettes, but you might be able to have designated marijuana smoking areas outside. And by the way, under the legislation, you're allowed to grow 4 plants in your house, but you can't smoke it. So how are we going to enforce that? You can grow 4, but you can't smoke it, you got to go outside. And I don't want to make too light of it, but I got an email from Communitech today about this company called Growbo, the smart box that lets you grow your own marijuana. So there's a huge industry, a huge commerce that's developed around this. You don't need to look much past the stock pages and how much euphoria there has been in marijuana. We're now the largest producer of legalized marijuana in the world. So there's economics, there's societal, there's public education which needs to be addressed. We have a lot of work to do. This unwinding of the legislation, there's going to be human rights appeals, it's going to go through the courts, people are going to test bylaws. We have a long way to go. We're not prepared for this. Municipalities are not prepared for this. And I think what we really need to focus on is taking it a step at a time and trying to develop the best solution we can based on the information we have at the time for our community. Secondarily, and more primarily, is we need to also have education programs for youth. Here we are launching legalized marijuana, but there's no real concerted effort to educate youth about the detriments of choosing marijuana and informing them on the risks of marijuana use. So there's lots of work to be done, and with your support, we'll smoke our way through it next 4 years.
Thank you. Now to Regional Council Candidate Jane Mitchell.
So of course I have to say that we're getting in the weeds with this. So the basic thing for me is I support the legalization of marijuana because right now, when it's illegal, fentanyl is in everything. And it is in, if you buy, it may be in your pot, it may not be in your pot when you're buying it illegally. So at least when it's legal, you know that it's going to be just pot. It's not going to be other kinds of illegal drugs in it. So that's sort of the bottom line for me. I also think that this is a way that we will be eliminating the illegal grow-ops that we have, where the police, I've seen pictures of grow-ops where they're growing it all in the basement, and it's not just 4 plants, it's lots and lots of plants, and it's pretty much destroyed the house. Whether you're a landlord or they own it, it's destroyed. It has to be put, if you try and sell that house, it has to be part of when you're selling it that they tell you that there's been a grow-up in there because the black mold, all kinds of problems. So at the region, as chair of licensing and hearing, we have the smoking bylaw. So this is going to be something that we need to look at in the next term, probably at the beginning of the next term. How does our smoking bylaw relate? As Sean said, we have had some, you can't have it in regional housing. Problem is medical marijuana. If someone has a medical marijuana and they are allowed to have their marijuana in their residence. So there's a lot of complicated things that we have to work out and see how are we going to do this. The province has just said that people can smoke in public parks. How does that affect us with our smoking bylaw and playgrounds and that kind of thing? So there are a lot of things in the air still. It's here, we're gonna have to deal with it. My personal preference is we just opt in as everyone else. I would have preferred it was an LCBO model, but that's not what we got. And hopefully the cities can work through that and figure out if they can make it so it's not across from a high school and that kind of thing.
Candidates, thank you for the puns, and thank you for the resisting the puns as well. I think that's a good place to wrap things up for the day. We covered a lot of ground, and I want to take time again to thank our candidates for being here and putting their name on the ballot and for showing up and putting in this hard work over the last several weeks, which I'm sure seems a lot longer to the people sitting to my right. On behalf of the Chambers, I would like to thank all the candidates once again for taking the time for coming out. I would like to thank the and staff at Rim Park for hosting, and of course, once again, thanks for everyone who was able to make it out this afternoon. If you are a resident of Waterloo Region, the municipal election date is October 22nd. It's rapidly approaching, so please ensure you're aware of your voting location. The Chamber hopes this forum has provided some relevant perspectives to your issues and concerns. Once again, thank you for coming out. Have a great afternoon.